Hello, Miss Allen.
Hi.
How are you doing? Miss Mason, are you on
Yes,
connected to?
I'm here.
Okay. And Franchise Tax Board, are you connected now?
Yes, we are both here. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for accepting the adjusted start time here. So we're just going to go over a couple items here before we get started. I'd like to welcome you all to the Office of Tax Appeals. And it's just a couple minutes before our start time. We'll probably start around 9:50. And I'd like the parties to quickly test your microphones. I know that it looks like they're working, but if you could please um, unmute your microphone and introduce yourselves. And we'll start with appellant.
My name is Amy Allen. I know you can't see me, but I'm here.
Thank you. And is representative there with you, Ms. Mason?
I'm in a separate location. I thought you were going to start with the panel. I don't think Mrs. Allen heard that. But my name is Doris Mason, and I'm representing Ms.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Mason. And Franchise Tax Board, can you introduce yourselves as well?
Yes, hello. My name is Topher Tuttle, representing Franchise Tax Board.
Okay. Thank you.
And my name is Maria Brasselhaus, and I'm also with the Franchise Tax Board.
Thank you both. So I'd like to remind you at this time, we're just about to start here, and this hearing will be available to the public on OTA's YouTube channel. And since it looks like we're ready to begin here, I'm going to ask that the recording is started at this time, so we'll give just a couple of seconds for the recording to get going. Good morning, everyone. This is the appeal. This is the hearing of the appeal of Allen, case number 2111958. I'd like to thank all the participants for attending today. We are not on the record yet, so I'm just going to go through a couple of housekeeping items first. First, my name is Seth Elsom. I'm a hearing officer. I will be leading this hearing today. On today's panel, in addition to myself, is Administrative Law Judge Natasha Ralston and Administrative Law Judge Stephen Kim. While I'm the lead for the purpose of conducting this hearing, all three panel members are co-equal decision makers. Also present is our stenographer, Ms. Alonzo, who is reporting this hearing verbatim. To ensure that we have an accurate record, we ask that everyone speaks clearly and loudly. Is everybody still connected here? Okay, it looked like we had a little glitch there. Again, please speak. To speak, please unmute the microphone and remute the microphone when you're finished speaking to avoid feedback and background noise. Please state your name before you speak. Speak one at a time and do not speak over each other. When needed, Ms. Alonzo will stop the hearing process and ask for clarification. After the hearing, Ms. Alonzo will produce the official hearing transcript, which will be available on the Office of Tax Appeals website. The hearing transcript and the video recording of the hearing are part of the public record. Finally, please remember that these proceedings are being broadcast on our YouTube channel, and any information shared during this hearing will be heard and or viewed by the public. With that, are there any questions from the panel member, from the parties?
I have a document that has not been entered, and I'm wondering if there's still allowable time. I've beat the clock on it. I've ran the time, and I just
Ms. Mason, we're going to address that in just a couple of minutes.
Okay.
When we go on the record, we can discuss that.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And Ms. Alonzo, are you ready to go on the record now? And panel members, are you ready?
Yeah, ready.
Ready.
Thank you. We're opening the record in the appeal of Allen, OTA case number 221111958. This matter is being held virtually before the Office of Tax Appeals. Today's date is Thursday, December 16th, 2025. And the start time is approximately 9:50 a.m. My name is Seth Elsom. I'm the lead hearing officer for this appeal. With me today is Administrative Law Judge Natasha Ralston and Administrative Law Judge Stephen Kim. As a reminder, the Office of Tax Appeals is not a court. It is an independent appeals body that is staffed by tax experts and is independent of the state's tax agencies, including the Franchise Tax Board. With that, can the parties please introduce themselves for the record, again, starting with appellant. And Ms. Allen, can you please introduce yourself?
Okay.
Okay.
My name is Amy Allen.
You're Miss Mason. You're representing appellant, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Miss Allen, can you please introduce yourself?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. My name is Amy Allen.
Okay. Thank you. And Franchise Tax Board, Miss Allen, can you please mute your mic?
Mute my-
Thank you. And Franchise Tax Board, can you please introduce yourselves?
My name is Topher Tuttle, representing Franchise Tax Board.
Thank you.
And my name is Maria Brosterhouse, and I'm also representing the Franchise Tax Board.
Thank you, Ms. Brosterhouse. As confirmed at the prior pre-hearing conferences and in my minutes and orders following the conference, the issues to be decided in this appeal are, number one, whether appellant has shown error in FTB's proposed assessment for the 2011 tax year, which was based on a federal determination, and two, whether appellant has established that the accuracy-related penalties should be abated. And now I'd like to address the appellant's request to allow additional evidence or additional exhibits, excuse me. Ms. Mason, can you explain exactly what you have today and whether you've provided these exhibits to the Franchise Tax Board? Ms. Mason, can you unmute your mic if you're attempting to speak?
Okay. The information I have is the original information that was requested for this hearing, and it's not before you. I think it's important, even though the circumstances are not warranted at this time, but I would like to enter this information, the document.
Can you explain what the document is? So at our pre-hearing, in your pre-hearing conference statement, you had listed exhibits 1 through 5, but you'd only provided exhibit 1 and 5. So we had 3 missing exhibits, and we provided a response date after the pre-hearing conference of January 2nd, 2025 to provide those. And then you recently indicated that you were going to, I believe, provide those exhibits on January 13th, but thus far we don't have those exhibits. So are those the same exhibits that you listed in your pre-hearing conference statement that we're missing? Or is this new information? They are?
Yes, they are.
I'd like to ask Franchise Tax Board, do you have any objection to the admittance of these exhibits into the evidentiary record?
So if the exhibits are admitted, I think we do object that they were not provided previously because there has not been an explanation of why they were not available in a timely manner. If the OT accepts them into evidence, FTB requests the opportunity to submit post-hearing briefing to respond to it.
Okay, Ms. Mason, we're going to deny the admittance of these exhibits because you haven't established a good cause for the late submission of these, but you can definitely address these in your presentation, and OTA will take those into account to the extent that any facts that you state in your presentation are relevant to the case. We'll include those and we'll take those into account. So we're going to admit exhibits 1 and 5 into the record. And that brings us to FTB. You submitted 11 exhibits, which have been labeled A through K. And then at the pre-hearing conference, you referenced an additional exhibit, which you did submit, and that's exhibit L. And I wanted to confirm with appellant, do you have any objections to FTB's admission of those exhibits?
No.
No. Okay. Thank you. And Ms. Mason, you indicated at the pre-hearing conference that both you and Appellant Allen will each be providing witness testimony. And I just wanted to clarify that that is still correct before we move forward.
That's correct.
Okay. And if you like, I can separately swear each of you in before you begin your presentation so that any factual statements that you make will be taken into account during the presentation, and they may be considered as evidence by the panel after the hearing. Are you okay with that, Ms. Mason?
Yes, I am. Mrs. Allen?
I'm okay with it.
Okay. Okay, thank you both. And at this time, I would like to ask Ms. Mason, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And Ms. Allen, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Ms. Mason and Ms. Allen, you may begin your presentation in whichever order you choose. And you have 30 minutes for your presentation. So it looks like that will conclude around 10:30. So you may begin whichever of you would like to begin first.
I'll begin first. And I've already introduced myself. I understand that that we're here this morning to discuss two primary issues. One of the issues is whether or not the appellant has determined error shown by the FTB's proposed assessment being based on for the tax year 2011 being based on a federal determination. And the other issue is whether or not the appellants have established that the accuracy related penalty should be abated. And in my capacity as representative for the Allens, I would say that we have reached a determination on that. I haven't discussed it with Mrs. Allen, and we will talk about that. I'm sure she'll understand. In summary, we're here as appellants because the Allens were involved in a couple of audits. One was 2010 that was resolved and is not before this hearing this morning. The other one was a 2011 income tax deficiency whereby the Allens received a notice of deficiency somewhere around it's in your December 12th of 2012.
Ms. Mason, before you continue, I'd like to just address an item that I missed. FTB's exhibits A through L are going to be admitted as evidence in the record today. So you can go ahead and continue. Okay.
But so we acknowledge the appeal, the necessary need for the appeal, and I'm really grateful, and I'm sure Mrs. Allen is, to have a final opportunity to reach resolution of it. It's been long-standing. So what happened is after they went through the prior audit, they decided counsel was necessary. We were in agreement with that, and fortunately, we did locate counsel. But I think one of the most important matters of that NOD was that we had a 90-day period in which to file with the tax court in order for them to have presented, their facts before the auditor, or if there was any disagreement with the auditor. Well, by the onset of the 2012, the 2011 audit, counsel was retained and took over, satisfying the former audit because they were like running consecutively. And it was, time was moving. So anyway, the attorney stepped in and as she would be her own counsel, or represent the Allens, she handled it in a way she saw fit. The 90-day letter was not filed. Instead, the audit pursued without the court petition. It became an argument made before the Internal Revenue Service by the attorney on behalf of the Allens, wherein it was stated that they had never received a 90-day letter. Well, upon introduction of the attorney to the Allens, because I had met her and referred her, I let her know that that was the important factor, responding to or filing that 90-day letter. That never happened. The audit pursued. The 2010, got settled in the midst of that, the 2011 audit. And so there was no other concern with that one. There was no deficiency, no penalty, a good outcome. After the attorney got involved in the audit, I remained available to the Allens for questions, having filed an amended return, and was kept abreast of what was going on pretty much through Mr. and Mrs. Allen. One of the things that was done, which I had tried to do, is get a reconsideration, and that took a lot of time. The attorney pursued to represent them during the audit. She continued to represent them, and as a part of that, she ended up requesting collection due process hearing. Prior to that, she had continued to get someone to reconsider the facts of the audit. That didn't happen. There was an appeal filed, and as it progressed, with me having read some of the documentation filed by the attorney and the outcome, it was stated that the collection due process hearing precluded any, it would take precedence over anything to do with the audit. She didn't want to hear anything about the audit. She just wanted to move, and did in fact give an opportunity to be heard by representing a copy of a notice of deficiency that ended up, it never got presented because of the ongoing dissension of the appellants not having ever received an NOD, the notice of deficiency. So it finally ended up in the collection due process hearing. And the hearing, the settlement officer there, Officer Derma, filed a summary motion for judgment, and it was filed, entered, and served all on November 15th, 2015. That might be November 18th. I stand corrected on that. At any rate, there was no opportunity for anything except that CDP. During that time, I guess it had lasted a while, and the Allens contacted me and asked me if I would come to court with them. There was something going on in court, which I really didn't understand, because without having filed that 90-day letter, that petition based on the 90-day letter, they didn't have an opportunity in court, which is what the attorney continued to represent. They never got their opportunity to be heard. They never got their opportunity to be heard, when in fact, it was her decision to not file that 90-day letter. I've read that CDP, and I was going to include more of it, but what I have said is it's substantiated already in the material. While this whole thing was going on, it didn't come to me, because I had kind of taken a back seat. But it didn't appear to me or come to my knowledge or understanding that the Franchise Tax Board had never been contacted. But through some means of the Internal Revenue Service, they were made aware of what was transpiring. And the collection due process hearing was where I had been contacted by the Allens to come and be present. I didn't get the name of the attorney that was there with the representing the IRS and the trainee attorney that she was also representing or assisting at that meeting. But it was very discouraging, and it ended up with a judgment in the favor of the Internal Revenue for an amount that really exceeded what it should have had it not been taken to so many different directions. Ultimately, I did get a letter from the Franchise Tax Board. Well, I got it from OTA, Mr. Tuttle, and someone else had reached out to me, Catherine, I believe. I don't remember her last name. But they simply sent a letter to one to the Allens, and I got a copy, asking us if we wanted to file an appeal. And the Allens agreed. I agreed to participate as a representative, and we're here today on that matter. The two issues I stated earlier, I'll repeat. Do we believe that the Franchise Tax Board erred when they decided to base their decision on the federal determination? I answered no to that. And the other part was whether or not the accuracy, the penalty should be abated. I answered no on our part. Me as a representative, it was my decision. I had not discussed that with Mrs. Allen, but as I said earlier, I'm sure she'll understand, because we haven't discussed anything that I'm talking about right now in the manner in which I'm speaking. The exhibits include correspondence from the Internal Revenue. The auditor for the Internal Revenue had made his mind up. It was said to me when I met him in person that there would be no change. He didn't want to see any information I had in support of the deductions and other criteria that was before the Internal Revenue. And that was that. But every time they got a letter, he would send me a letter. And he would vacillate. He's not changing anything. And then I received a letter, one of which I was including, where he did, in fact, under the explanation of how the numbers were computed, he changed his mind because the audit, which I should have said at first, it had to do with the Allens having held themselves out from outside information, from infliction. I looked it up. I suggested it would be a good idea. So they included an election to be considered real estate specialists, professionals, in terms of the fact that they had began to acquire property, and they had in fact acquired property. And so they made the election, and it was included as a part of the 2011 return. Well, that was a hornet's nest, so to speak. But that was the decision made, and we followed it. I think I had to do with the audit because I made a mistake in there too. And I think that was one of the first words I mentioned when I had been contacted by OTA, mistake. I believe Officer Elsom asked me what I meant by that. I never tried to explain it until I represented myself before the Allens. At any rate, the appeal on the part of the Franchise Tax Board before the Office of Tax Appeals this morning has to do with the finalization of that particular audit, 2011. Franchise Tax Board had no opportunity to participate, which would have been better. We wouldn't be here today. It would have long have been resolved, I believe. But I'm grateful that we are here today because the opportunity that the Allens had been afforded had the 90-day letter suggestion been acknowledged and the petition filed, I believe it would have had a favorable end. I can say that from where I sit in my interaction with the auditor, his mind was made up from the beginning. It was not going to be a no change. It was going to be a no change audit. But even he, in all of the letters that we've received, and there at least half a dozen letters back and forth every month with requests for information and a computation of the outcome. And each time the balance grew higher and higher based on the fact that interest is charged daily, compounded, and the time involved was long, outstanding. And so the deficiency ended up being $32,954 and excuse me, there's some cents added to it. I think it's 19 cents. I stand to be corrected. But we had taken deductions on the return that would have gotten attention. And so I'm not here to defend that one way or the other at this point. I made my determination that no, we don't believe in my representative capacity that the Franchise Tax Board has erred on either one of those issues. And I base that on the fact that they didn't get the opportunity to present themselves and enter in their position at the onset of the audit. I think it would have been better for all parties involved. However, the information that I'm not now allowed to present was just a mere show of the encounters that were being experienced throughout the audit process. It was a true battlefield of opinions and decisions, facts, where people, each person involved, based on their individual representative capacities before the Internal Revenue Service, from the standpoint of counsel, from myself, it was like a war zone, and it's a very disappointing outcome, but it is what it is. I want to again express appreciation for the fact that the Allens, Mrs. Allen, her husband is now deceased as of March 27th, 2019. So Mr. Allen has not been afforded his opportunity because of the fact that he, it's fate, I would say. Who knew? But at any rate, I would like to say that a part of the exhibits, if I'm still, and I believe I can still submit those, they would show the vacillating opinion of the auditor. It was a situation where dialect was very important. I think the letters served better as a form of communication than really the face-to-face meetings that we began with in order to assure that we were being understood, that the communication between the auditor and I at the onset, which initially began during the 2020 audit, was clear. And so I appreciate him and his participation. The Franchise Tax Board, or since I've been introduced to the Office of Tax Appeals, OTA, I found it to be refreshing because I do respect the fact that the state of California has two governing tax bodies. On the federal level, it's the Internal Revenue Service. on the state level, it's the Franchise Tax Board. And I made my my decision of there being no error on the part of the Franchise Tax Board simply because, from my standpoint, that should have been an automatic inclusion. But audits are not easy. They can be very complex, and so I respect their decision, because if it were not from the collection due process hearing that finally stopped, put an end to the audit process. I mean, it went from 2012 to 2015. That's a long time. However, it's settled on the part of IRS. And what I also appreciate about the Office of Tax Appeals is that they're a body in representation of the Franchise Tax Board, the CDTFA, and other agencies represented by the state of California, who, even though they made that determination based on the federal determination, they it's a presumption that they're afforded. And but for the completed package of those existing or outstanding exhibits, they'll have a fairer or a clearer understanding of exactly what happened. We have 30 minutes to speak. I haven't timed myself, but I don't want to take up too much more time without allowing Mrs. Allen to state her opinion.
You have about 10 more minutes now, so if you want to continue or allow Ms. Allen to speak, that's you've got 10 minutes to do so.
I think it's important that you hear her point of view, even though she's chosen me to represent her. I've done the best I could, given the circumstances. It was bigger than I imagined, preparing an appeal, but you have part of it, so I will deliver the rest. But it would be totally inappropriate to just hear me and not hear Mrs. Allen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Am I to speak now?
Ms. Allen, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Okay. I'd like to thank Ms. Mason, first of all, for agreeing to speak for us. I am not savvy in the laws of the tax board and all that kind of stuff, but I do know that as an American citizen, I feel like I wasn't given due process, if I can say that. I did meet with the auditor, who was a foreign speaking person, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, but we could not understand him and he could not understand us. And every time, everything we said to him, Ms. Mason said to him when I did not, he would say, no change, no change. To me, when they gave us an opportunity to have this reviewed, it should not have gone back to that same person. Some other eyes should have looked at it rather than Mr. Yoshi, because he refused to look at it again. And I know that they have more than one tax auditor. Somebody else could have looked at it and decided, maybe they would decide the same thing he came up with, and maybe they would not have. But I feel like we weren't dealt with properly. I don't think we were given a fair shake, and it just worried my husband to death. And he passed. So then it passed down to me. I can tell you this. Every refund we were supposed to get was taken. Even part of my husband's Social Security was taken. Even part of my Social Security was taken at some point. And I'm probably not doing a good job at what I'm saying, but I want you to understand how I feel. I feel like we were being, I don't want to say picked on, because there are millions of people in the U.S. who, with taxes and stuff. But I do feel like we were kind of, because we were older and didn't really know, I think that whatever errors were made, um, at some point we should have been allowed to explain or have it explained to us exactly what happened. Um, I'm not thrilled with the whole tax process, and I guess you can tell that from my voice. But we've never, my husband and I never ever tried to cheat on our taxes. He was a decorated war veteran. He was wounded. He had a Purple Heart and all that, and he was a straight shooter. He didn't want to, not 1 ounce of anything. I might have been different, but he would not let me. We had to do whatever the law said, and so that's what we did. And I feel like we're just being mistreated at this point, and that's about it.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Either of you have 6 minutes left to present. If there's anything else that you want to add, you feel free. Either one of you can add. And if you're finished, we're going to turn it over to the Franchise Tax Board to ask questions regarding the testimony. So would you like to add anything else, or were you complete with your presentation?
I would. Thank you.
Okay. This is Ms. Mason.
Thank you. I would appeal to the OTA to use their discretion and their assumptive ability to see through the explanation that we've provided. If I were to just speak based on feelings and emotions and fact, Mrs. Allen brought forth really important facts. But the audit was not fair, and it was not done in a manner where anybody could be afforded any blame. We started off with a 2010 audit before the IRS, and it turned out really good. No deficiency, no penalties. That's a miracle. But it had grounds for that. We didn't earn it. That was a mistake. But the 2011 audit has afforded the IRS the ability to prevail, which I thought had it gone another way, we would have proceeded. But I want to make it plain. The attorney that represented the Allens did her best. I respect her. But she, in not understanding or realizing the urgency of that notice of deficiency letter, that 90-day letter that would have allowed everybody to state their position and be done with it in a fair and truthful manner, lots of money would have been saved. They ended it with IRS to a tune of an amount that I mentioned at the onset. The state has their own, they make their own decisions. They do agree with IRS, and I'm going to cut it short. What they are asking for is small in consideration of what the Internal Revenue has received, and we believe that there's still outstanding monies. But I believe that I made the right decision in finding no error in their opinion to have ruled the way they did. And I would just ask, in all decency and order, that they would take the time to review the appeals response, the document, the remaining exhibits, and the hearing response on file, and be assumptive or use that power that they have in their respective position to consider the amount, and perhaps a settlement can be reached rather than pay that sum, because they have been penalized seriously. I thank you. I rest my case.
Thank you, Ms. Mason.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the Franchise Tax Board for any questions that they may have regarding appellant's testimony.
Thank you. Franchise Tax Board does not have any questions.
Thank you. And I'd like to turn it over to our panel now. Natasha Ralston, do you have any questions for appellant?
Not at this time.
Judge Kim, do you have any questions for appellant?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. I did have a couple questions for you. Ms. Mason, if you could clarify. It looks like there were two separate items that may have been adjusted. I'm not entirely clear if these are connected. So there's some Schedule C deductions. There's cost of goods sold. There's other deductions or other expenses. And then there's a car and truck expense. And you had stated in your opening brief that your husband was retired. I believe he was a contractor. And I wanted to clarify, is that a separate business that your husband was, or your ex-husband, excuse me, your deceased husband was operating at the time? Or did this relate entirely to the 3 rental properties? Can you just provide some context there as to how those expenses were incurred?
You mentioned my name, but it's directed to Mrs. Allen.
Either of you can respond to that. Whoever's familiar with the Miss Allen, can you respond to that question?
Do you want me to?
Go ahead, Ms. Mason.
Mr. Allen was retired from the Department of Water and Power, had been long retired, but as a part of that, he was an electrician for more than 60 years. Based on his experience and for so long a time, in their church, he was a trustee. And so he kept doing providing electrical services, but not on a full-time basis. What he was doing was training other young gentlemen who were interested, members of the church or someone in the community, on how to provide those same services. So he was an asset to the community. In relation to the properties, yes. He worked with, and I didn't verify, but there were 2 gentlemen that he used a lot in that business who worked with him, and most of the monies he made from that activity, they were small, and he would end up spending them as compensation to the gentlemen because they were both independent contractors. So it had a lot to do with the buildings, the houses that were purchased. They bought one out of an estate, and they had another personal residence that was in need of repair. They were just getting involved with that prior to the 2010, because the house that they purchased was bought in December of 2009. So right at that time, they received an NOD from IRS. There was not sufficient time to really put it up for rent because it was in ill repair. It had quite a lot of work. Please pardon my stammering. I have a tendency to get nervous.
That's okay.
But anyway, that was a part of the rental activity. We were of the opinion, I really felt strong about it. I thought I really understood it, that you didn't have to show that you had a real estate license and you were selling houses in order to elect to group your properties together and have them treated as one entity rather than having to meet a real stringent requirement of contributing 750 hours a year in the performance of a real estate professional. It also came at a time when I learned that IRS was conducting lifestyle audits, reality audits. And the auditor, thanks Mrs. Allen for mentioning his name. I'm going to try to slow down a little bit because
Ms. Mason,
okay.
I believe you've fully addressed that question.
Okay.
So I thank you for that. And I just want to clarify. So we have potentially 2 separate issues. We have the Schedule C expenses that were disallowed by the IRS, and then it looks like we have passive losses that were also reduced by the IRS. Is that basically correct? And the last follow-up question would be, did the IRS disallow any of these expenses for lack of substantiation, meaning they asked you to prove those expenses and you either couldn't, or excuse me, Miss Allen couldn't provide the information necessary to prove those expenses or didn't have it?
I'll start by saying this. They're good record keepers. Like I said, Mr. Allen was a trustee of the church. He kept records. He used, he had his own way because as a part of it, there's a section 274 in the Internal Revenue Code that references it, and it's something that they inform us of all the time, that we need to keep records. It has to be double entry. If you write a check for something, surely there's a receipt somewhere. So yes, we were able to substantiate quite a bit. We were just with an auditor who I've come to respect and appreciate, who really didn't understand my dialect, and I certainly didn't understand him. So there was a serious issue of communication. And I think we accomplished the communication that we did by the continuous letters. Like I said, I have at least a half a dozen of them, and all of them are full of questions. He has self-employment tax in one or two of the letters, but there's no self-employment income. Then there's self-employment income with a maximum self-employment tax with no consideration for any cost that he incurred. So yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Mason. I believe you addressed the question. So now we're going to turn this over to the Franchise Tax Board for their presentation. And you have 10 minutes and you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you. And good morning. My name is Topher Tuttle, and I'm representing respondent, the Franchise Tax Board. With me is also Maria Brosserhouse, also of the Franchise Tax Board. There are two issues before you today. First, whether appellants have established error. Whether appellants have established error in FTB's proposed assessment for the 2011 tax year, which was based on a federal assessment. Second, whether appellants have demonstrated that the accuracy-related penalty should be abated. Turning to the first issue, California law requires a taxpayer to concede the accuracy of federal changes or state where the changes are erroneous. Under Todd versus McColgan, it is well settled that FTB's deficiency assessment is presumed correct, and the taxpayer bears the burden of proving error in FTB's determination. In this case, FTB received notice from the IRS that it had audited appellants for tax year 2011 and disallowed various Schedule C and Schedule E deductions. FTB then made corresponding adjustments in its proposed assessment. Throughout both the protest and this appeal, FTB has repeatedly requested up-to-date federal account transcripts from the IRS to verify that there have been no further federal changes. In preparation for this hearing, FTB obtained an account transcript dated December 19, 2024, which is identical to the federal account transcript attached to respondent's opening brief as Exhibit C. This means the IRS has taken no further action on the account. FTB is not bound to follow the IRS's adjustments if appellants were to establish that any or all of them are erroneous. However, appellants have not provided any documentation to establish that the IRS's adjustments are erroneous. Thus, appellants have failed to satisfy their burden of proof, and respondents' proposed assessment of additional tax should be sustained. Turning to the accuracy-related penalty. When respondent imposes a penalty, the law presumes that the penalty was imposed correctly. The accuracy-related penalty was imposed pursuant to Revenue and Taxation Code Section 19164 and Internal Revenue Code Section 6662, which require a 20% penalty on an underpayment of income tax that is attributable to substantial understatement of income tax, among other grounds. A taxpayer has a substantial understatement of income tax if the amount of the understatement exceeds the greater of 10% of the tax required to be shown on the return for the taxable year, or $5,000. In this case, appellant's understatement for tax year 2011 exceeds both of these thresholds. Although there are defenses to the accuracy-related penalty, appellant has not raised any argument that the penalty should be abated. Since appellant has failed to establish error in respondent's proposed assessment and has failed to raise any grounds to abate the accuracy-related penalty, respondent's action should be sustained. Thank you.
Thank you, Franchise Tax Board. Mr. Tuttle. I'd like to turn this over to the panel now for any questions. Judge Ralston, do you have any questions for appellant, or excuse me, for the Franchise Tax Board?
No questions, thank you.
And Judge Kim, do you have any questions for the Franchise Tax Board?
No questions for respondent.
Thank you. At this point, I do not have any questions for the Franchise Tax Board either. And we're now going to turn this over to appellant for appellant's rebuttal or closing remarks. Ms. Mason and Ms. Allen, you have 10 minutes and you begin your presentation when you're ready. Go ahead and unmute your mic. Ms. Mason or Ms. Allen, either one of you can begin if you have any rebuttal.
I'm not muted. My statements before or in answer to the two issues presented to me, I still stand on the decision that I made because of the fact that the matter didn't really get heard by the Franchise Tax Board. They had no participation whatsoever because they were not informed. However, and it has been explained to me, and I did understand the presumption that the Franchise Tax Board maintains. But in all due respect, as Mrs. Allen stated, they didn't have a voice. They didn't have a voice because of the representation. And also because of the lack of communication. And so I look forward to, even after presenting the remainder of the information that was due earlier, the outstanding exhibits will speak in a more clear and concise manner to the issues that remain, especially in regards to the determination of the amount of money that perhaps through some presumption consideration may be found. And by that I mean reduce it. Find favor in the information that you will receive. When I agreed to represent the Allens, I came from a whole different perspective. It was as if I was still being audited. And so I grasped the information that pertained to the audit. And as I said to prepare it, I just couldn't get it done because it really wasn't hitting the mark, so to speak. Until recent, I understood that this was the final opportunity for them to at least obtain some favor in from the standpoint of the decision that's been made and accepted from the federal standpoint. They didn't have a voice because they were led through counsel, who I have whole respect for, in a direction that was totally argumentative. It wasn't a situation where a resolution could be had. It took a New York settlement officer through summary judgment obtained through the United States Tax Court to have her judgment approved in an exorbitant, I'm embarrassed to state how much money they're out. That was the opportunity that we responded to the audit for in the first place and could not. reach a communicable level of understanding. So to me, it's a travesty of justice that they have been, that they've suffered the loss that they have. And hopefully, when the exhibits that I did not send, since you've asked me to provide them, and they will be, they are in a position or in the format that you would expect them to have been in if we were in an audit situation, so over again, trying to fight for the issues that they were entitled to at the onset of the first audit. There's information that I don't even need to mention because it's all over Instagram and everywhere. Congress even reprimanded the Internal Revenue because of the manner of treatment they were going about during the time of those two audits, 2020 and 2011. And now the Internal Revenue themselves have lifted the burden on people who qualify as real estate professionals without a license. Even the laws in the real estate industry have changed. Nothing is written in stone. So I appeal to you in the best way I can that you would extend your presumptive ability to look favorably upon the outcome of your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mason.
You're welcome.
Ms. Allen, did you want to add anything? You've got about 3 minutes left here.
I don't know what I could say that would change the outcome, but I would like a fair assessment. And I'm not saying that the Franchise Tax Board is not being fair, and maybe I am, but I would like it to be looked at in a fair manner, not just what the paper said, not just what the book said, but look at it, fairly, and know that we didn't do anything wrong. So if you can, if you will, just look at it fairly. Look at it from a human standpoint, not necessarily based on the words say this and this is what we go by. Look at it, from your heart.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to our panel for questions for either appellant or the Franchise Tax Board. Judge Ralston, do you have any final questions for appellant or Franchise Tax Board?
No questions, thank you.
Judge Kim, do you have any questions for either party?
No, thank you.
Thanks. I do not have any questions for either party. I would like to provide appellant the opportunity to provide these work papers that you've referred to with regard to the IRS and their audit, and also substantiation of costs related to any deductions that you believe you can prove or you attempted to prove at the time but weren't given the opportunity to. And I'm going to issue a post-hearing order, which will state the documents that we would like you to provide, or give you an opportunity, to provide the exhibits that you intended to provide. Let me restate that. And we'll give you 30 days to provide those, and Franchise Tax Board will be given an additional 30 days to respond. And with that, I believe we are ready to conclude the hearing. I would like to thank the parties for their presentations today. The panel of 3 here today will meet and decide the case based upon the arguments and evidence in the record. We will issue our written decision no later than 100 days from today. The case is submitted and the record is now closed. This concludes the hearing for the appeal of Allen.